I'm going to turn it over to Herb, who we're really excited to hear from. So thank you, Herb.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Monica. A sobering disclaimer before we begin. As many of you know, if you follow the news, right now as we're meeting, there is a civil war in Ethiopia. And oh my goodness, the holy cities of Lalibela and of Aksum are being invaded by the government from Addis Ababa. And this is an ethnic war, etc. It's got rootage for hundreds of years. And right now they will not apparently allow, unless they've just changed UN observers and food aid and what have you. So we'll see what happens. This is totally, from my viewpoint, unexpected. The new prime minister, my goodness, he had his PhD in reconciliation skills. He won the Nobel Prize for Peace, my goodness gracious, and he is leading the charge into Lalibela, etc. So very sad. Now I say that because I am not going to pretend to handle that crisis in this presentation. We're going to bracket that. If you have questions or comments, Roger Schrock, wherever you are seated, knows far more than I do about African politics, and talk to him. In the 35 years that Gene and I have had the pleasure of traveling internationally from McPherson College, the most incredible communal religious experience we had was undoubtedly in Ethiopia. The most important holiday in Ethiopia is not Christmas. And by the way, Christmas is January the 7th. Okay, it's not Easter, it's not Pentecost. It's a holiday you and I don't celebrate. It's called Timkat. Timkat, or you can put ET. They celebrate the baptism of Jesus and other events in the life of the Christ. Gene and I, whenever we've gone there, they defer to us. Do they ever? One year we went there, they put Gene and I on television every day. I actually kissed Gene on TV one day. I think they bracketed that. One night we were called in at midnight by the Prime Minister for a press conference. The head of Ethiopian Air took us to the Sheraton Inn, et cetera, et cetera. So wherever we are deferred to. And in this case, we were up front. The doors of the St. George's Cathedral, where the entombed body of Haile Selassie is found, and his wife Makonnen, were opened up, and out came the real, or a replica of, the most famous art object in world history, all the world religions, the Ark of the Covenant. And Gene and I were positioned so that we were so close we could have touched the Ark. And you know the story in the Old Testament, if you touch the Ark, it's curtains, it's thanatomania, you are deceased. Well, we were surrounded by 2 million Ethiopians, most of them wearing white. And as the Ark continued on, people went into a charismatic trance, and women were prostrating themselves, and many of them were going into the morning rituals. The Ark of the Covenant, which had been given to Moses on Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, perhaps in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, coming down from heaven, and then used by Joshua to circumambulate Jericho 7 times before he commits genocide. And then the Philistines capture it, and the Philistines get cancerous tumors, so they make tumors out of gold, give it back to the Israelites. And King David then is the one who brings the Ark of the Covenant dancing into downtown Jerusalem. The Ethiopians love these stories, and they imitate David dancing into Jerusalem. And then David's son Solomon, of course, builds the great temple, puts this into the Holy of Holies, and once a year, a high priest would go in there, stirring warm blood, the blood of a bull, later the blood of a goat, and throws it on the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, covered with gold, made from acacia wood, supposedly having the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments inside. And on top here, 2 cherubims. Cherubims. Now, when you hear the word cherub, I'm thinking of my granddaughters when they were like 5, 6 years old, little cherubs. These were ferocious, animalistic like angels, and yet they were sexually oriented. And in Jewish thought, especially in Kabbalistic thought in the Middle Ages, it believed that on the holiest day of the week, that's Friday night, that's the beginning of Shabbat, the Sabbath, these two creatures would sexually embrace the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was paraded through Addis Ababa for over a mile, and it was the most incredible experience of my lifetime religiously. Well, what did people in the ancient world think about Ethiopia? What did the Greeks say? The Greeks said, where is paradise? Ethiopia. Where does Zeus go when he wants to throw a party for the gods and goddesses? Ethiopia. Where does Poseidon go to be refreshed? Where does Hercules really perform his 12 labors? Where is Atlas holding up the world on his shoulders? Ethiopia. Where are the tallest people in the world? Where are the most attractive, handsome people on the face of the earth? Where are the most religious people on the face of the earth, the most moral people? The answer, from the viewpoint of the Greeks, was Ethiopia. Well, how ridiculous, but maybe how true. When you look at our Bible and look at the book of Genesis, look at the story of the Garden of Eden. There's 4 rivers, Tigris, Euphrates, yep, we've heard about them, Mesopotamia. And then there is the Pishon River, which some say is Mother Ganga, the Ganges River of India. And then there's the Gihon. Where's the Gihon River? The Ethiopians will tell you it's the Blue Nile. There are several hotels, we've stayed in them with students, called the Gihon Hotel, Garden of Eden in Ethiopia. And what do modern anthropologists tell us? I was just with the new director of the museum who has a degree in anthropology. Where have humans come from? Where are the oldest Homo sapien skeletons? In Ethiopia. And where is if there is a missing link, if you believe in evolution between humans and non-humans, Australopithecus afarensis, found on Gene's birthday, November 11, 1974, in Ethiopia. Where did our mother, our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother come from, the mother of us all, the primordial Eve, about 150,000 years ago, according to anthropologists, Ethiopia? Wow. Okay, before I present, I would like for those of you who have been to Ethiopia to acknowledge that by raising your hand. Some of you have traveled with us, or you have traveled otherwise. Okay, we've taken 6 different groups, and we usually have limited that. Most of our trips we've had 30 to 36 people, but to Ethiopia we limited to 16. And Tanya over here, who I will not ask to give a speech, she traveled to Ethiopian mission trip about 20 years ago. Yeah. Okay. Let's open it up wider to Africa. Who here has traveled to or even served in some African nation state? And oh my goodness. Just go ahead and mention, Groves, where you were for the sake of the group. Most people know you.
Zaire, the Congo.
Zaire, the Congo, and then
Nigeria.
And Nigeria, and the Shrocks, of course.
Nigeria, South Sudan, Ethiopia, shortly, Kenya, and Uganda.
Okay, and did I see someone else here? Yeah.
We just visited South Sudan.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share some art objects. Then I have a PowerPoint. I'd like to share some stories coming out of the Ethiopian scriptures, which are not in our Bibles, and then some aspects of Orthodox religion. Okay. I have here a picture of Jesus who is washing the feet of the disciples, and yes, like the Church of the Brethren, they wash feet during Holy Week. And this is a typical Ethiopian picture. You can always tell who the good people are because they have 2 eyes looking straight forward. If Judas were on this picture, and we suppose he's one of the 12 in the back here, he would be to the side, and you see 1 eye. And who is the elder gentleman here that Jesus is washing the feet of? Peter. and Peter here is old. In traditional cultures, it is good, it is wonderful to be old. When Gina and I taught in Japan, the first question they would ask us, I don't care where we were teaching or taking a tour, they would say, how old are you? And the older, the better, okay? So this is a compliment to Peter being the old one here. Okay. I have an Ethiopian cross here. If you worship at an Ethiopian church, you walk up and then you kiss the cross. Ethiopians do not have a crucifix. Crucifix means, like the Catholics, where you have Jesus hanging from the cross. Now, they believe that they have part of the real cross of Christ. Constantine's mama, about my age, I'm 78 years old, took a trip from Constantinople, named after her son, all the way to Jerusalem, and she said she found the cross of Christ. His mama, by the way, Helena, had been sold into prostitution by her daddy. Okay? She has a checkered background, to say the least, and a victimized background. But she found the cross of Christ. She divided it into 4 portions, gave one to Rome, one to Constantinople, one to Antioch, and one to Alexandria, Egypt, and that got to Ethiopia. So one of the big holidays in Ethiopia is Meskel. I think it's September 27, in which they bring out the real cross of Christ, the real cross of Jesus. And one of their, what should we say, legendary theological traditions I love. It goes like this. Where was the Garden of Eden? Near Jerusalem. And where were Adam and Eve buried? They were buried on a hill outside of Jerusalem called Golgotha. Well, who is crucified on Golgotha, the garbage dump of Jerusalem? Jesus the Christ. And the blood of Jesus rushes down the cross into the mountain and washes away the sin of Adam and Eve. This is one of the instruments used in an Ethiopian worship. It's called a sistrum. And this goes back to ancient Egypt, pre-Christian, the worship of Isis. There were Isis temples all over the place, maybe 200 during the time of Jesus. I don't care wherever the Apostle Paul was, Ephesus or Corinth or whatever, he would have had a temple of Isis there. The word Paris is really Par-Isis. Okay? And this was used to celebrate her. Now, does the Apostle Paul write about this? You better believe it. 1 Corinthians 13, we all know it, the love chapter, in which he says, please do not be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. It's the sistrum. Now, when Ethiopia picked this up and Christianized it, what did they say? Well, these 5 clanging things here are in fact the wounds of Christ. And in a worship service, when you're doing this, this is not simply symbolic that Jesus bled on the cross. He is bleeding right there realistically. He is bleeding right there realistically. I brought along a prayer stick, which was just sent to me by Dr. Bob Powell from Kingsley, Iowa, trustee for years. And Bob has brain cancer, you all know. I'm with him about a half an hour every week. He's a pretty wonderful person. That's saying the least, folks. And he sent this to me. He knew I was going to do this presentation. This is a prayer stick. And in the Ethiopian worship, they do a dance number. It doesn't look like a dance number to us. And they're going like this. Now, every time I'm hitting the floor, I am hitting Jesus. Jesus was hit Thursday night, the beating of Jesus. So in an Ethiopian worship, when you're doing this, Christ is suffering. And if that sounds brutal to you, think about the Roman Catholic Mass. Think of the word Christ Mass Christmas. What does that mean? It doesn't mean Jesus in a manger, it means Jesus suffering. And in the Roman Catholic Church, there is transubstantiation, and either before or after the bell is rung, the wafer that you're going to eat or the wine that you're going to drink is literally the body and blood of Jesus. It's not symbolically speaking. Now, it doesn't look that way. It's not going to taste that way, thank goodness. But it is the type A, O, or whatever type blood Jesus had. And his muscle fiber is there in the wafer, the body and blood. And so it is believed also by the Ethiopians. And they believe literally that Jesus is suffering right in the middle of a worship service. For us, angels and demons, I suppose most of us here, are symbolic language. We may believe in angels and demons, but we don't talk about them very much, do we? When Jean and I hosted 2 Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka and Japan, they were on a world peace tour. This is in Harrisburg. They asked us before they could come into our house, could we cast out the demons out of your house? And I said to Jean, I thought we did that last Thursday. And they did. They performed this ritual. Okay? Well, in Ethiopian thought, and throughout Africa, I think, angels and demons are all over the place. You attribute more to angels and demons maybe than to human beings. And they have all kinds of names and mythologies about angels. And here is the angelic hierarchy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with another angel on top here. And these are all labeled. Up here are the seraphim. The seraphim are ferocious, and they have snakes, fiery snakes in both hands. They're protective. Here are the cherubims who were outside the Garden of Eden, twirling batons made of fire so Adam and Eve wouldn't get back in, and also on the Ark of the Covenant. Here are thrones and dominions and powers. Here are the regular angels, and then here are the archangels, a country of angels and demons. Here is board carvings of Jesus, and I'll just be real brief here. Jesus is Negroid. His mama is Negroid. Jesus is carrying the cross. And we have angels with him. Here, when the guard is coming to get him in Gethsemane, who is here? Well, one of his disciples, and they got a fly whisk. You would have a fly whisk in Africa. So Jesus is being serviced here by one of his disciples. Here is finally, Jean, if you want to hold this one up. This comes from Lalibela, which is also pictured on the board. It's one of 11 churches. It's one of the wonders of the world, folk. It's 11 churches are monolithically carved. Mono means one, lith means stone. One stone each. I would say a quarter to a third of the size of Miller Library into the ground. Each one of them as much stone together as the pyramids of Egypt. Wow. And here are the priests who are inside there. They're really inside a place where we take students on Sunday morning. Sunday morning you don't sleep in. We take you out to the countryside. We trek up this mountainside for about a half an hour. We come to a cave where there are right here 16,000 bones of people who, in the middle of nowhere, 16,000 bones of people who have come from all over Africa to die at this sacred place called Jerusalem. Back in the 13th century, there was a king by the name of Lalibela who was really a little boy. And his brother wanted to kill him to become king. Harbe was his name. And he gave him a beer, and the beer was laced with poison. And Lalibela went into a trance state, a coma, as he drank this beer. And in the coma, he said he flew to Jerusalem, and God says, you now are going to build the 11 churches of Lalibela, which is like the New Jerusalem of Africa. Okay, thank you, Jean. I'm going to share with you about the Ethiopian Bible. I've showed you this before. This was given to me by one of my students years ago. This is the African Heritage Bible. Look how thick. You know why it's so thick? Because every time Ethiopia or Cush, K-U-S-H is the biblical name for Ethiopia, is mentioned, big, long dissertation on it. And Ethiopia is mentioned 68 times in the Hebrew Bible alone. And every picture here, every picture is Africanized. Abraham, Sarah, Rebecca, up here, King David, Jesus, and all the disciples look like they're living on an African landscape. the African Bible. Now, our Bible has what? 66 books. Kind of standard. And none of us sit around challenging, well, does the book of Jude belong in here, or should we modify Hebrews or whatever? The Ethiopians, however, have at least 81 books in their Bible. And some of them are curious. I really like them. They have a book called Little Genesis. It's also called Jubilees, which answer a lot of the questions that I had as a child. As a child, I was asking you too, where did Cain and Abel get their wives? That stomps the teacher every time, okay? Well, they'll tell you, Cain and Abel were both twins. They were born boy and girl, and then they married their twins. Well, how did Adam and Eve feel after they were kicked out of the garden? Pretty bad, anguish. Adam spent days just standing motionless in the Jordan River. They both became suicidal. The book of Jubilees. And then the book of Enoch. For goodness sake. Enoch in our Bible is a one-liner. He was the seventh in line from Adam. His son was Methuselah. He was the great-granddaddy of Noah. And it says, he lived 365 years, and then he walked up to heaven. Well, what did he do there? Well, the Ethiopians will tell you nonstop. He went there, and he learned all the things you and I try to learn at Melhorn Hall. Chemistry, physics, cosmology, and all the things that Dr. Langley used to teach, the history of humankind. And at the end of the world, who is coming back? Jesus, of course, but the person we're going to really look for is Enoch. Enoch is coming back. Now, I know what you're thinking. How goofy is that? Well, let me tell you, if you go back to the time of Jesus and you go to the Dead Sea, which is the Salt Sea, and you look at the Qumran writings that were found there, the most prominent book there, over and over and over, was Enoch. And when Jesus says you know what's the most impressive title for Jesus? It's not Christ, it's not Son of God, it's not whatever, it is Son of Man. And Son of Man refers to Enoch, and it was taken over by Christianity. Well, the Bible of the Ethiopians. The portions of their Bible that I love are the stories about Mary and Jesus, which never got into our Bible. Let me share a little bit about that with you. The one gospel is called the Proto-Gospel of James. James is the brother of Jesus, okay? And the story goes like this. There was a man by the name of Joachim, or Jacob, and then he had his wife Anna, or Hannah. And they could not have a baby. And now she's approaching menopause. And now she is putting on her former wedding gown, and she is suicidal. She's going out to the wilderness. Who knows what's going to happen? And an angel appears to her and says, Anna, you're going to give birth to a little girl, Mary. And this is exactly what happens. By the way, Miriam, was the name of one out of every 4 women during the time of Jesus. There are 8 Marys in the New Testament alone. Joseph was married twice before he married Mary. What was the name of his first wife? Mary. What was the name of his second wife? Mary. What was the name of his third wife? Mary. Okay? Well, Jacob and Anna gave birth to Mary. At her first birthday, they said, this is not our child, this is God's child. We need to give her what. No, they can't do it. Second birthday, can't do it. Third birthday, they bring in the priests and the Sadducees and everyone, and they tearfully give up their baby, Mary, to the temple. Now, what's her job in the temple? Well, they roll the dice. That's how you decipher God's will. And it comes up that Mary is going to weave the purple cloth, the holy cloth, between the holy and the Holy of Holies. That's the cloth that tore in two, when Jesus dies on the cross. She is the Vestal Virgin, 7 little girls. Now, once she hits puberty, 13, and she has had her cycle, she is now impure. In Ethiopia today, women cannot go into church during that time of the month. And if you go to an Ethiopian church, a large one, there might be 100 women standing outside. They cannot go in. And they're impure when they give birth to a baby boy for 40 days, a baby girl for 80 days. This is all Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, incorporated into Christianity. Well, it's time now for Mary to be married. And all the eligible bachelors show up, including a 47-year-old Joseph. So, what happens? Out of the temple there flies a dove. It lands on his staff, goes back in the temple, and the die is cast. They're going to marry each other. What's their reaction? Joseph says, I don't want to marry her. I'm too old. I mean, he was like her grandpappy, all right? And Mary says, I don't want to marry him because I want to remain a virgin, but God has spoken through the dove. And so you have this 47-year-old guy marrying a girl who is 12 or 13 years old. There are surmises that Mary, at her wedding, thank goodness she had a veil. She was probably crying most of the time. If she was fortunate enough to have a doll, she probably had a doll that she was clutching at her very wedding. Well, Mary and Joseph give birth to the Christ child. And you know the story where Herod puts out the edict, the baby boys are to be killed, and they're going where? To Egypt. Well, not really. According to Ethiopia, they spend most of their time where? In Ethiopia. They spend 3.5 years. And you might say, well, now, how could they afford that? What did the wise men bring as gifts? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. If somebody offered you all three, which would you go with? We're going with the gold. No way. Frankincense, ounce per ounce, was far more valuable. That bankrolled their whole movement. Now, if you go to the Church of the Brethren, you can see a picture of Mary and Joseph and the Christ child on their way to Egypt. And who's sitting on the donkey? Well, Mary, of course. No way, no way. If you go to developing countries and people are fortunate enough to have a donkey, when we first went to Lalibela, there were no cars there. Donkeys were like Mercedes. It was always the guys in the donkey. Now, sometimes the guys would allow the woman to be in back of them, maybe holding on, but the guy is going to be in the donkey, even if Mary were pregnant and even if Mary were carrying wood when they were walking along. According to the stories, they go down to Egypt. Along the way, 2 robbers come, and they're going to rip them off. And one guy says, let's kill them. And the other one says, no, no, no. His name was Alexander. No, 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 Dumachus, we can't do this. Well, what happens? They let him go. Who are the 2 thieves when Jesus is at Golgotha and is being crucified? Remember, on his right and left? Alexander, at the good position, and Dumachus over here. And Jesus releases Alexander and takes him up to paradise. Along the way, Mary is breastfeeding the baby Jesus, even though she has a nanny with her. According to Ethiopians, it wasn't simply Joseph and Mary and Jesus, there was Salome. And in case you haven't heard about Salome, 1 out of every 23 women at that time were named Salome. And now when Mary would breastfeed Jesus, she would light up. The Shekinah, the presence of God, enveloped her, and she heard angels sing. But sometimes she would drop the milk on a stone. Now, you can go to Egypt and Ethiopia and see stones that have white marks, and of course, the white mark is basically the milk from the Virgin Mary. Jesus is taken to a school. He's a child prodigy, and he's 9 months old. And the teacher's up there and says to the students, do any of you know the ABCs? You know the Alpha Beta? And here comes Jesus, I suppose, crawling at 9 months, and he goes, you know, A is for this and B is for that. And the teacher just steps down and says, you know more than I do. He's the child prodigy. Wherever Jesus goes, he heals people. His swaddling clothes become a healing relic. And Mary even keeps the foreskin from his circumcision, puts it in a jar with some sand and oil, and that's used for healing the rest of their journey in Egypt and Ethiopia. Well, anyway, Ethiopia is tied to the life of the Christ child. I'm going to show some PowerPoints. If you have any comments at this point here, feel free to come forth. Okay, I'll go back. Let's see. No. Okay, do you want to adjust any lights or maybe not? And this is a collage of pictures, not any special sequential order. Ethiopia is at a high altitude. Africa is the highest altitude continent of all. And where we go is 6,000 to 8,000 feet up. So it's wonderful temperatures the year round. An exotic landscape. The Nile Falls, the Blue Nile Falls, is during the rainy season longer than the Niagara Falls. This is not during the rainy season. Tukul huts, scenic beauty. Ethiopia used to be forested. And you know what they're doing now? Get ready for this. Now, the Civil War puts all this on hold. They were committed to plant 20 billion trees. One day, they planted 383 million trees in Ethiopia. Wow. So, land of scenic beauty. The African Rift Valley runs along the east coast and is famous for archaeological and anthropological studies. Here's the Rift Valley that goes all the way from the Sea of Galilee down through the Dead Sea and then the east coast of Africa. And this is where Lucy was discovered. We'll see her in a moment. Yellowstone Park-like landscape. John just gave me a book on the beginnings of life on Earth, how life can sustain itself even where there's 176 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's life there. Here's also exotic landscape. And here, controversially, maybe for some of you, is Australopithecus, that means Southern Ape afarensis. This is Lucy. She was found November 30, Jean's birthday, 1974. And she was found by Donald Johanson. She's like 3 feet 6 inches tall. She goes back 3.2 million years ago. She's partly ape, partly humanoid, mostly ape. In fact, her name is Southern Ape. And she's found at the hottest place on Earth, hotter than the Dead Sea, than the Death Valley in California. So this is Lucy, and they are proud of her. He was playing the Beatles number, Lucy in the Sky, when he found her, so that's where chosen. And here she is, her skeleton in the Addis Ababa Museum. They parade her all over the place in terms of advertisements. Up into the 19th century, almost all the homes in Ethiopia were rounded. Here is Addis Ababa, capital city. Here is the best inn in Africa, unless the recent Hilton Inn has suppressed it. 5-star hotel because of the African Union. And there are many ethnicities. There are 90 different languages. Ethiopia should be a country. Should not be a country. It's got 90 different languages. And National Geographic 10 years ago did a spread on the ethnic groups. Dean and I spend quite a bit of time with them. They're the most unspoiled ethnic tribal groups in the world. Castles. How in the world did they get castles? Well, the Jesuits came. They were architects. And for about 40 years, Ethiopia became Catholic on steroids. It tried to wipe out Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Here is Lalibela, one of 11 rock-hewn churches. Here's an obelisk. Axum has 140 obelisks, far more than Egypt. And there are those who say obelisks are far more spectacular than the pyramids. How could that be? Well, you got to carve them out of one rock. Good luck in not breaking that rock. Then you got to move that rock. In Egypt, they moved them 500 miles. Then you got to set it up without falling. And of course, they have fallen, the largest one in human history. In recent years, Italy spent $1 million sending back to Ethiopia an obelisk that Mussolini has stolen. Here is the place where they say the Ark of the Covenant is, and I'll come back to that story. Here is the color-coded many festivals with the umbrellas. Here is Timkat being celebrated on a holy day. And men during that time jump into pools of water like Jesus was baptized. Here is a monk. He may go into that cave and never come out. And here are monks who climb all the way up and are there for years on end. The food is sent up to them. They are there until their death, and their skeletons remain there. Here are monks in Lalibela, and I have here Haile Selassie. Haile Selassie took the name at coronation in 1930, meaning Holy Trinity. The most popular name, by the way, in Ethiopia is Haile Mariam, Holy Mary. And that's the most popular name, not simply for girls, but for guys. Military leaders, or one of the great prime ministers was Haile Mariam Mengistu. The Rastafarian movement chose Haile Selassie to be the Messiah upon the earth. It came out of Jamaica in the 1930s and brought us dreadlocks. Have you noticed how dreadlocks are more popular now than ever? And they believe, and I know this is controversial for you, that marijuana was the major form of communion. When Moses goes up to Sinai and there's smoke there, that's marijuana. When Ezekiel and Isaiah have their visions of God, that's marijuana. Okay? When Jesus is at the Last Supper. And Haile Selassie is the key person in human history. Haile Selassie was a great emperor when he started out, and then he just overlooked famine and everything else. And in 1974, the communists came along, assassinated him, and then they said, you like to be in Volkswagens? We're going to put you, you like to be in limos? We're going to put you in a Volkswagen to take you to your grave. Okay. And here, I put Barack Obama, because when we went during his administration, little children would come up, several of them saying, first of all, Africa is not a country. Remember Sarah Palin's remark? That went worldwide. And the kids would come up to and say, Obama, 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 yes we can, yes we will. Obama t-shirts, Obama gift shops. Obama was loved in Ethiopia. And now we'll see the second group of slides. This is the Cedars, and everything is free. No, okay. Okay, Gina and I got to go to Ethiopia the first time through Harvard University. They offered a postdoctoral course there with Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who is pictured here in the white outfit from Harvard. And there was Mengistu, who is the prime minister and part of our entourage. This is Ethiopia. I'm just going to skip through quickly now. The Nile Falls. Here's our group. Every time we go, we meet with the Abuna. We meet in the mansion of the patriarch of the church and sip tea with him for an hour or so. Here is the capital city. Here is the Queen of Sheba story, which I'm going to share in a moment. Here are women prostrating worship in the Ethiopian church. Women over here, men over here. The twain do not meet. Here is the tomb now of Haile Selassie, and it's been put into a church. His reputation has been resurrected. And here are treasures from the museum, including the Ark of the Covenant. And they believe that the real Ark of the Covenant is in a little town called Axum, and it is guarded in there simply by one priest. He's the only one that can see it. And even women are not allowed, Jean was not allowed to even approach this walkway here because she is a woman, okay? So this is a male type of domination in terms of religion. Here are priests who were greeting us, etc., etc. Camels, tuko huts, day at the market. Lalibela is perhaps the most religious city in world history. 1 out of every 4 or 5 people is a priest or a monk or a nun. Wow. I think Ethiopia is the most religious country for Christianity on the face of the earth. Maybe Nigeria would disagree with that. Okay, and here we have priests, a city of 1,000 priests, an orphanage which we have gone to with our students. And here's the underground churches, which is pretty precarious. I have somebody holding my hand all the time as we traverse these areas here. And here we have Sunday morning worship, a priest chanting away in Geese. Their Latin is Geese. It's an ancient language. And here we are. The reason why we go and return, and Jean, you want to mention about this young man or not?
Yes, I could do that.
I have no mic, that's on.
Okay.
Loud.
This is Sinku Duvali Casa. He's the first young man that we sent one of the wheelchairs that are made down in let's see, is it Heston?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mount Ridge.
Mount Ridge, thank
By
you.
the Garrish.
Yes, I thought about it for a while. But he is the very first person. That's the picture. I saw him. We were just walking along with the guide and so forth. And it was a very rugged kind of a walk and that sort of thing. And here, all of a sudden, I saw this boy, and I thought, oh my gosh. And he was just sitting there and had these big, sad eyes. It broke my heart. And I wanted to take his picture, but I didn't want to insult him either. But our guide had told us that if we did take a picture of somebody, that we should give them a little money. So I handed him like a $10 or $20 bill, and hoped it would, actually end up that much being in his hand by the time he got it exchanged. And thought at least maybe it would help him to have something to eat or whatever too. And it turned out that he was, as far as I know, either an only child or else one who was just left to float on his own. And he just drug himself across the ground and the dirt. It was dirt, no cement, no nothing else.
So since then we've taken 30 wheelchairs for children and others. If you have polio, you obviously have sinned. Otherwise, why would you have polio? And you are in your hut, and there's nothing in that hut the whole day long because the whole family is embarrassed by you. And when they come crawling out of their huts then and get these pet wheelchairs, it's like giving somebody a Mercedes and giving them life and status. It is absolutely emotional. There are our students, we give lots of school supplies that students love when we come around. Okay. Going to tell the major legendary tradition of Ethiopia, which you may have heard, is so colorful. It comes from the Middle Ages, a book called the Kebra Ganast, and there are many different versions. I'm piecing together one of them. There was, of course, the great King Solomon, Suleiman. And he had, 700 wives, 300 concubines, tons of gold. He was the wisest person on earth. He wrote the Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, what have you. Well, who heard about him? The Queen of Sheba. And where's the Queen of Sheba living? Well, of course, in Ethiopia. So she gets together her entourage, and she goes all the way to Israel. And Solomon's really taken by her and basically says, do you want to be part of my harem? Or do you want to be my #1 wife? And she says, no, I want to remain a virgin. I'm the queen of Ethiopia. And he said, fine, I won't touch you unless you take something here that's not yours. So that night he serves everyone at a banquet some really salty fish. And of course, where's the water? Right at Solomon's bed. And she goes there, takes the water, he grabs her, and then has an affair. Now, in our language, folks, that's statutory rape, okay? And she becomes pregnant, not to his knowledge. Well, she goes back to Ethiopia, gives birth to a bouncing baby boy, and names him Menelik. Melek really means king. Menelik, as he's growing up, he's 12 years old, he's playing soccer or thereabouts, and his friends say, we know who your mommy is, but we don't know who your daddy is, meaning you are a bastard. What's going on here? So he goes back to his mom and says, who is my daddy? And she tells him the story. And he says at 12, I'm going to go see daddy. And she says, no, you won't. Wait till you're 21 or 22. At 22, he sets out with an entourage and gets up to Jerusalem and meets his daddy, Solomon. And he says, Dad, in our language. And Solomon says, you're not my son. And then Menelik says, oh yeah? Look at this. Here's the credit card that you gave to my mama. Credit cards at that time were seals. 96% of the people couldn't read or write, so you'd have this seal with an animal on there that you would use for your signature. You gave this to Mama. And then he looks at him and he says, my gosh, you're good looking. You look like your grandpappy. Who's the father of Solomon? King David. I'm going to name you David II, David II. You're going to succeed me. I'm going to anoint you right here. Oh no, Dad. I want to go back and become the king of Ethiopia. So Solomon says, okay, then I'm going to take the high priest's son. The high priest was Zadok. His son was Azariah. And at least 24 others, or maybe other young men, and they're going to teach the ways of Judaism to Ethiopia. Well, Azariah says, now wait a minute. If I go to Ethiopia, I can't relate to the Ark of the Covenant. It will be in Jerusalem. So he steals into the temple at night and takes the Ark, and they go to Ethiopia. So, who has the Ark of the Covenant today? Ethiopia, in Axum. Okay? And that's why the Queen of Sheba and the Ark of the Covenant are linked together. And every king since Menelik is the grandson, great-great-grandson of Solomon, going up to Haile Selassie. He was the 228th in line. Okay? And all this is referred to in literature, never got into the Constitution, but is heralded by Ethiopian people today. I'll say a few things about the Orthodox Church to wrap up, unless you have comments at this point.
I have a question. Why were the churches carved in stone? Out of stone?
Yeah. In Ethiopia, there are hundreds of churches and cave churches. There are at least 200 cave churches alone. If you go to Turkey, there are 200 to 300, in Cappadocia alone, 200 to 300 churches carved out of stone. I think it was a way of honoring God. How did they do this? Okay, how did they do this? Well, they said it was angels who were working at night. Some archaeologists believe that the people from India came over. You know, India is next door. And if you've been to the Ajanta caves, which are carved out of rock, well, it looks quite similar. Or maybe this happened over hundreds of years. That would be my explanation. I think it was a way of worshiping. But I wonder how much slave labor was involved in this, like the forced labor perhaps of the pyramids. Yes?
I went with her, Deb, and I went.
Yeah.
Those churches are the most amazing thing you have ever seen in your life. I mean,
Yeah.
you come walking up on a flat surface,
Yeah.
and then the ground just opens up, and these churches are down in this huge hole. So they literally had to start at the surface, carve their way down to the base of the church, carve the outside of the church, then tunnel inside, and carve out the inside of the church, including these ornate pillars and carvings in the ceiling. And they are just the most incredible thing I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
And, you know, I stand before you. How much did I study about Ethiopia in all my graduate school and all that? Zero, folks. It's been the last 25 years I've been introduced to this. This is not in our textbooks. Ethiopia has a country now of 110 million people. It is growing. It has gone fivefold in the last 60 years. By the year 2050, they'll hit 200 million. But it's the 12th largest country in the world now. It's the 7th largest Christian group. And to me, this is one of the wonders of the world. Just real quick, a few things which I mentioned on Sunday. My goodness, babies. Babies are baptized 3 immersions in water, of course. The 40th day for the boys, 80th day for the girls. That would be the Old Testament way, folks. And they anoint them 32 times in different parts of their physique. And then they put a crown on their head, and then they're confirmed. Now, the baby can't be confirmed in theology, so it's the mom or dad. The boys are circumcised at 8 days old. That's a religious ritual. Unfortunately, sometimes the girls are circumcised, and that is the torture of girls and women, as you well know, called subincision. That is now being sort of passed by, but I have seen all kinds of pictures and demonstrations in that regard against that. Ethiopia has mandated 180 days of fasting. They have for their Lent not 40, but 56 days. Advent season, 40 days fasting, anticipating Jesus coming to Ethiopia, etc., etc. Now, besides the 180 days mandated, they have 70 other voluntary days. I don't think I'm going to volunteer after 180. Now, what does fasting mean? It means not severe, that you would have no food. You could have one meal, supposed to be minimalized, after 2:45 in the afternoon. No milk products, no meat products, no grease. You can have some fish, but people of Ethiopia are of a low calorie diet to begin with anyway. So this is a very festive religion. The death rituals. If you go to an Ethiopian funeral, people are flailing. They may be pulling their hair. Women would be, of course, going with the fluttering of the cry, and they become ecstatic in a trance at the death of a person, and then they have masses for the dead. They do, however, have I call it a cheat book for the life after death. They believe that Jesus revealed 9 secret names, and they give you a book which they tie around your neck. This isn't always the case, that you have to sort of have passwords for the heavenly realm. To me, Ethiopia is the most colorful, rich in terms of traditions and liturgy, Christian country that people have never heard about. Thank you for listening.
What about Moses and Ethiopia? Was Moses ever in Ethiopia? Or how did he come by his Ethiopian?
Yeah, the tradition is that Moses actually either fought against Ethiopia and then married and was successful and married the queen's daughter, or that he actually fought for Ethiopia. After all, his wife Zipporah was Ethiopian. And there's thought also when the Israelites go through the Red Sea and the Sea of Reeds with the Exodus, that they didn't all go through there. Some went south and went to Ethiopia. And the Jewish population in Ethiopia has been prolific over the centuries, prolific, hundreds of thousands. There are only 4,000 left now because they were horrifically treated by the Christians, who called them hyenas, and they were airlifted in Airlift Solomon to Israel. And when they get to Israel, the Israelites, the people of Israel look like you and me, Anglos, and they said, you don't look like Jewish people to us, so they had to recircumcise them, and there's prejudice now against them in Israel. But the Jewish people have been prolific in Ethiopian history because of the traditions of Moses. And yeah, Phil?
I heard that another impact with Ethiopia was it was never colonized.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's what the Rastafarians are. Are you aware that countries are a modern invention? That throughout most of humankind we had city-states and empires? When the Church of the Brethren was founded, 1708, Schwarzenau, Germany. No, there was no Germany. There was like 70 different provinces. And it was only gradually that we developed nations. And in 1883, Leopold II of Belgium says, let's carve up Africa. And he brings together all these European leaders, no African leaders, and they say, Germany, you like the southwestern portion? Okay, you can have that. The Brit Isles, you like Nigeria, you can have that, even though Nigeria has 200 different languages. Let's make that into a country. Africa is made up of 53 countries, which should not be countries. 76% of Africans live in a country where they don't know the primary language. And you have Hausa people who are in many different countries, Maasai people, et cetera, et cetera. So we have countrified or patriotic countrified Africa. One country never got dominated by Europe except for Mussolini for a short while, and that was Ethiopia. And they are proud of that, and they should be. And that's why the Rastafarians said, hey, they are the land of liberation. Anybody else? Raj?
Can you explain to these folks the patriarchal nature of the Orthodox religion and yet it's in a culture where matriarchy is the dominant factor in terms of culture?
Okay, what I read is that of all African nation states, women's rights are less in Ethiopia than maybe any other country. It is really pretty pathetic. The literacy rates of women have been in the 30 percentile recently. I mean, they're just beginning to come up. And men just talk the way I've seen it to women, the way is just not respectable. So there's patriarchy which is flowing throughout. So I don't see the matriarchal thing. The people in Ethiopia really do not honor their patriarch or the church hierarchy, the bishops, the archbishops, the priests. They honor the monks who take the vow of poverty and who go and chant, in these caves. Those are really sacred people, but they really do not honor the patriarchy. Do you want to comment in that regard?
Well, one of the things that I was told by some Ethiopians is that the matriarchal nature of the passage of land, for example, is
Oh.
to women,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes back to the Queen of Sheba.
Yeah.
So it just struck me as very, very different, and also the fact that you have so many different tribal groups in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about is primarily the dominant group,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't.
Amhara.
Yeah, Amhara.
Yeah, and somewhere along Ethiopia's had two queens, Sheba and then Gudit. And if you believe the story in Acts, where the Ethiopian eunuch is reading, and Philip says, "Oh, you're reading about the Christ," and then he goes back, and his queen is Candace. Wow, you got a woman there. There were 2 or 3 queens, but after a while there was an edict that only a guy could be the king. And I think that was even in their constitution for a while. Anybody else?
Well, thank you all.